Good. Hi. Welcome to the latest version of the webinars from the European Union for Progressive Judaism. I'm Bill Echikson. I'm director of the EUPJ's Brussels office, and I'm here at our headquarters in the Bet Hillel IJC synagogue. We're fortunate to have Eric Frey with us from Vienna, and we're calling this edition A Voice from Vienna. The reason, unfortunately, that we have Eric is that earlier this month, an Islamic State sympathiser shot 4 people dead right in front of the Vienna synagogue. And although the synagogue was closed, and it's not clear that the synagogue was a target, that same synagogue was the scene of a terrorist attack in 1981 that killed 2 people and left dozens wounded. Eric Frey was born and grew up in Vienna, and he's the son of Holocaust survivors. He attended Princeton University in the US, and he began his career as a journalist in Frankfurt. Actually, we were colleagues at that time. Eric worked for Dow Jones Newswires, and I worked for Dow Jones Newswires as well. And since 1991, Eric has been working for the prestigious Viennese newspaper Der Standard, where he's been head of the foreign and business sections and was the chief news editor for 16 years. And he's currently president of Or Chadasch, the progressive Jewish community in Vienna. Welcome, Eric. Let's start right with getting into the news. How did you see this latest terrorist attack? Was it really anti-Semitic, or was that just an accident that it took place in front of the synagogue?
Well, that's something we still don't know. The attack took place right in front of the synagogue, in the neighborhood of the synagogue, so you would automatically suspect this was the target. However, this is also kind of the main entertainment and bar district in Vienna, so it could have just as well also been directed just at the place where lots of Viennese would go out at night, and a young jihadist who wants to just basically attack Western decadence would also kill. You were wondering because Monday night at 8 o'clock, it's quite clear that there would not be any activity at the synagogue. So this would suggest it was maybe not the target. However, there are signs that this was not the time the attacker actually had planned. He may have been planning it for days later, but that night was the last night before the lockdown started. So he may have just kind of moved forward and almost in a panic decided to go ahead and attack, was maybe surprised that the synagogue doors were closed, and then started shooting at other people. So we don't know about the targets, but all that we know also about other attacks in Paris, in Brussels, by jihadists who are kind of who are loyal to the Islamic State. For them, it's all the same. I mean, they want to attack the West, they want to attack Europeans, but Jewish targets are kind of the prime targets. They kind of feel they get extra points, which is what happened actually particularly in Paris. So certainly for us Jews in Vienna, it is a very disconcerting event.
Right. I mean, we felt that this has long taken place in France, that there's a local population that is hostile to Jews, that is attracted by Islamic fundamentalism. Is this the case in Austria as well, or do you find this more of an isolated incident?
This is something we're all trying to figure out now. The attacker, the terrorist, he was actually an Austrian-born son of migrants from northern Macedonia, ethnic Albanian, but he was born here, he raised here, he went to school here. So this is not kind of imported from anywhere else or from Syria or so. And for the longest time, I mean, Austria, as you mentioned before, had this experience with terrorism in the early 1980s, but this clearly came from Palestinians who would just travel to Vienna to find a target here. In the last few years, when you had these various new wave of Islamic State terrorist attacks in Europe, the feeling in Austria was, well, this is not going to hit us. Austria has quite a large Muslim community. Most of them are Turks. And the Turks tend to be these days quite, some of them tend to be nationalist, but not in the same way radicalized by Islamic ideas as maybe North Africans and others that you find in Europe. The group that's the most concerned, that gives the biggest concerns, are actually Chechens. There's a fairly large group of Chechen migrants here, and they tend to be have quite strong radicalism. Here you had someone who was coming from northern Macedonia and actually being still close to his village there. You would have never suspected that these kind of young people would fall into the hands of these radical preachers and then decide. But as it turned out, there is a network there. He wasn't alone. Maybe he acted alone that night, but he had friends, he had people he was sharing with, he had meetings with people from Switzerland, from Germany. So there is a scene that tends to be, these days, we have to be aware of it, that is basically ready to go and use violence against targets they see, which their ideology tells them to attack.
And how has the Jewish community reacted to this attack, and what is the general situation for Jews in Vienna and in Austria?
Well, Vienna is a burdened place. I mean, this is where Hitler got his first anti-Semitic ideas. It was the place in 1938 when tens of thousands, 100,000 went on the streets to applaud him, where Arization really happened fastest. There were so many Austrians who were also involved in the crimes of the Shoah. And after World War II, there was for a long time, there was just no willingness to confront the past and the responsibility. At the same time, Vienna has become one of the most comfortable places in Europe for Jews to live. We had periods of anti-Semitism in the past, and we have issues also today. But if you compare to many other cities and countries in Europe or even all over the world, as a Jew in Vienna, you can feel fairly safe, secure. The political atmosphere is actually very positive toward Jewish life. The current government is trying to do almost everything to support Jewish life. The Vienna government, which is of a different party, is also doing it. And it's a small community. It's about 8,000 people who are registered, but you have at least twice as many who feel are Jewish. And they have here a flourishing cultural, social, even political life. So any kind of attack like that would be something which hits people really hard, because it says, okay, what's going on? Are we still going to feel safe in the future? There have been other attacks in Germany in Halle. There was a very small but still anti-Semitic attack against a small synagogue in the city of Graz, which is the second largest city in Austria. So we are aware that this is not, you cannot relax. But generally, living as a Jew in Vienna is actually something in the year 2020 is something there's not that much to complain about.
That's interesting. And this really hasn't changed that general sense of security, or has it really shaken Vienna more, those fundamentals that you were talking about? This attack, that's what I was referring to.
Sorry, I didn't hear the first attack. Whether it has shaken...
this attack shaken those sort of sense of security and prosperity?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I mean, people have been aware and concerned also before. I mean, we all aware what's happening in Europe, and whether when it is in Paris, in Brussels, also when something happens in Israel or in Pittsburgh. As a Jew, you always feel that this is also going against you. So there's never a moment of saying, "Oh, it doesn't concern us." I'm not sure whether it has really made any fundamental change in life here. You know, the problem is right now, because of Corona, we are also now under a new lockdown. So basically, you cannot go to religious services. It's hard to meet your friends, so it's even more difficult to even communicate and share your concerns and your worries and your fears. Yes, it is something which makes people, also makes a lot of Jews more aware of the precariousness of our existence. But it hasn't fundamentally altered the way I think people feel about Jewish life here. And by the way, a lot of them, I mean, if you talk to a lot of my friends, are much more scared even in the past than I would be, or I described it to you. So there is an emotional side to it too, which says no, basically living in Europe, living in Austria, it's always something you can never be safe. You should live on your packed bags. Some people will always feel that way. Objectively, it has not been necessarily supported by facts.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and I agree. Here in Brussels, also, we have the issue of the synagogue as a fortress, and it's very hard to get people in. What is the situation in Vienna at your synagogue? What is it easy for outsiders to get access to it, or do you have security worries?
Well, I certainly hope not. We have security worries. We have had security forever. I mean, Or Chadasch was founded 30 years ago, and we've had this our synagogue, which is basically in the second district, which is the main Jewish district in Vienna, has always had a fair amount of security, because this is something which is just standard in Austria, and I think as it is almost everywhere in Europe, and these days everywhere in the world. We are at one hand, I mean, the liberal community, Or Chadasch, is fairly small, so it would not be the most logical target of anyone who is looking to attack Jewish life here. At the same time, we're a little bit more exposed than many of the main Orthodox synagogue where this attacker was in a few 3 weeks ago, or some other smaller Orthodox shuls, because we are more open. We have programs where we have more people also from who are Christian, maybe also liberal Muslims. So we are in a course of dialogue. We are trying to be a place which is not kind of closing itself off, but opening it up. So this can make you more exposed, and this can also make you more vulnerable. And the question of security is something which is very much on our mind right now, because the Austrian government is just about to pass a law where they're giving actually a fairly large amount of money towards the Jewish community in Vienna to secure its places, which is an excellent message and a strong gesture, and also will help security everywhere. But the issue is for us, Or Chadasch, the liberal community, are we going to be able to participate? And this has to do with the very complicated politics of Jewish life in Vienna.
Well, we'll get to that next. If you want to have ask questions, you can be unmuted and ask them verbally. We'll take questions as you go, or type them into the Q&A tab, and I can read them out as well. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Jewish politics, Eric. What are they? I mean, what is the history of liberal progressive Judaism in Vienna? I would have thought before the war it would have almost been a majority there. What is it afterwards, and are you accepted as equal?
Well, actually, no. Vienna has had a special place. While Germany kind of was the birthplace of Reform Judaism, Vienna never had a Reform synagogue until 1938, not even until basically 1990. It was always only Orthodox. However, the Orthodoxy in Vienna was relatively tolerant and liberal. So they kind of tried to incorporate those who were not as religious and not as observing. And this even happened after World War II. After World War II, there were very few the Austrian survivors of the Shoah who who were actually survived in Austria as so-called submarines. Most of the Austrians who survived the Shoah had actually fled and emigrated. So, and the Vienna Jewish community was made up then mostly by refugees from Eastern Europe, displaced persons who really didn't want to come here, but they just got stuck here. Most of them more Orthodox, more observant. The rabbis, the chief rabbis in Vienna, were actually always, they were Orthodox, but as tolerant and liberal as you can be within the Orthodox framework. This was Akiba Eisenberg, and then his son, Chaim Eisenberg, became later a rabbi, and he continued that tradition. However, Or Chadasch was only founded in 1990 as a very small group, and for the established Orthodox community, this was something they didn't want. They said, we don't need it, we don't want it, and there was always a more radical Orthodox factions and their own synagogues, and they totally rejected it. Now, Vienna was proud, the Vienna Jewish community was proud to be a unified community, which they're still claiming to be today, except this is the Israelitische Kultusgemeinde, the IKKG, which is also the official representative of Jews in Vienna, because Austria has this funny tradition that actually religion has to be recognized and regulated by the state. There isn't that much of a separation between between religion and state as in France and in Belgium. So they claim to be unified, but they say, oh no, but you liberals, you don't belong. Because look, if we accept you, anyone could come, Madonna with her Kabbalah or Jews for Jesus. So it's like, okay. So we have been for 30 years fighting this very difficult battle of achieving recognition, which is kind of almost a guerrilla warfare. Step by step, we have achieved much more. The synagogue is actually in a building which is owned by the main Jewish community. We're getting some subsidies. We can publish in the newspaper and the medium of the synagogue, of the community. However, it's always kind of a question mark. How far are they willing to go? So this is like this is also the big challenge now for me, and I assume the presidency in August. Then how can I go along on this, go further in this path to achieve more recognition, more acceptance, also more money, when for example, when it comes to security, because we're always short of money, given that our community is so small. But we have to be always aware that there are those for whom liberal Jews are maybe like as bad as any enemy they can think of, which probably you know also about.
Yeah, no, it's pretty much the same situation here for us in Brussels and around Europe often, but we made progress like you. What would be the next concrete steps for recognition and equality between progressives and Orthodox in Vienna?
Well, the one thing which we concretely now have to negotiate, given that the Austrian, the official community, the main community will receive like €4 million a year for security, that we get a fair share of it, because we have really desperate needs for our own security, and it's really burdening our very small budget. The other steps are just having for example, there is like in Austria has a system where religious education is part of the official school system. So you get actually grades when you're going to Jewish religion. You can even do your baccalaureate in Jewish religion.
Judaism,
and
yeah.
we offer our rabbi Lior Ba'ami or others are also offering Jewish instruction. So the question is, how can we achieve a situation where our Jewish education is also recognized by the schools and by the school system? It used to work for many years, but kind of under the radar. It was always like informally it worked. Suddenly some bureaucrats got a little bit edgy, and now we have to renegotiate it. But it's working well. I mean, for example, there's a new chief rabbi now in Vienna from the new Orthodox chief rabbi, who, unlike his predecessor, who was more on the maybe fundamentalist side, seems to be very open-minded. And our rabbi has had actually established a very good first relationship with him now, where apparently we can work things out on a pragmatic level. What we would like to see is finally a situation where also the law or the regulations and also in the governance of the main Jewish community of the EKG is actually accepts liberal Judaism as equal. It is something which Germans have through the so-called the Central Council of Jews in Germany, where liberal communities are just a part of, which we would like to see also in Austria, but this would require a very different approach to the relationship between the state and the way that the Jewish life is organized. So this is still a hard slog.
It's the same story or similar story here in Belgium, in Italy, Hungary. We have the same issues there. Okay, tell me a little bit, Eric, about yourself. I mean, how did you end up in Vienna, then at Princeton, then going back to Vienna, and how did you end up approaching progressive Judaism?
Yes. How did I? It probably has a lot to do with my parents. My mother comes from a small town in eastern Austria, Mattersburg, from a her father was really the Orthodox religious, really. And she grew up in an Orthodox household, but went to as a high school student, went to the United States when she was 17. And spent a year with a Jewish doctor's family in upstate New York, and they were Reformed. And she found out you can be a good Jew without being Shomer Shabbat and being kosher. My father was born and raised in Budapest in a family which was as assimilated as you can be without leaving Judaism. So he was still there, and he always said if Hitler hadn't come, he would have probably just left the religion. So for him, religion was never important. Together, when they married and raised the children, they were a part of the normal Orthodox Vienna Jewish community, but it was always so strange because my father, who didn't really care, was the one sitting in the synagogue downstairs, and my mother, for whom it was important, was banned upstairs. And they never liked the situation. And so when Or Chadasch was founded in 1990 by these enormous efforts of my predecessor as president, Theodor Much, who really single-handedly started this and carried it through for 30 years, they were on board and they said, this is exactly for us. This is where we belong. I, partly because of my mother's time in the United States, we had this very close contacts to the US. So this idea of studying in the US was something which was very attractive. I was really, really grateful to get this opportunity. So I was able to go to Princeton, and there, when I looked for Jewish life, Jewish organizations, Jewish events, the kind of the conservative strand of Judaism was the one which fit me best. And there was this wonderful Hillel director, Eddie Feld, who is one of those great people in America, for also as an educator and as a writer. And I just felt at home there. So for me, it stayed with me, progressive, like to be progressive, to have a progressive Judaism, live my life in a progressive Judaism was just something very normal. And when I came to Vienna and my children, and I married and I had children, it was always so important for me. I figured, Judaism is not the only thing in my life. I mean, there are other things which are also very important, including politics and social values and political values. And I don't want the gap between them. I mean, I see it so important to fight for justice, for equality, for tolerance in everything, in every part of life. How can I accept that when it comes to high holidays, I as a man am privileged, or I have a special role which women don't? So this equality of men and women was something which was so totally obvious to me, that I really felt I needed to get involved. My father had been on the board of Or Chadasch for a very long time. He passed away 12 years ago. President Much asked me whether I could take his seat. I said yes. I never expected it to be a lot of work and time, effort, but all these things happen. You slide into them, and then you get addicted.
Yes, it's true. So we do have a question about Or Chadasch. Do immigrants is Or Chadasch mostly made up of immigrants from Central and Eastern Europe, or is it Americans who've come back to Europe, or who?
No, it's also interesting. The reform or the liberal communities in Germany, they have a strong participation. There are a lot of immigrants from Russia who are there, because those who came from Moscow and St. Petersburg often have a very liberal approach to Jewish life. The Russian immigrants in Vienna are different. They mostly come there, so-called Bukharen from Uzbekistan, or they are from Georgia. They are Sephardic, and they're actually very religious. So we have few immigrants from Eastern Europe. We have quite a large number of Americans who happen to live in Vienna. But they come to Vienna, they live here for a few years, and sometimes they leave again. We have a few families who used to be part of the established Orthodox community and said, no, liberal Judaism is the right thing for me. The community is probably made up to a large extent of people who had a weaker link to Judaism. They had maybe a Jewish father, but not a Jewish mother, and didn't really. And sometime once in their life, they realized that they want to that the Jewish identity is really important to them, and they were looking for a place to dock on, to attach to, and there Or Chadasch was very attractive. So it's a very heterogeneous group. It doesn't fit into any clear pattern, which sometimes makes it more difficult to establish a kind of a vibrant social life, because everyone is so different and have different interests, different backgrounds. But particularly in the last few years, also because of the initiatives of our rabbi who started 3 years ago, we have many more young people coming in now, and some of them who knew they were Jewish but didn't care in the past, and want to connect again, and a few others who are just basically come here because of it's something they're exploring, and they realize it's the right thing for them.
Interesting. So, but why would you have returned from Princeton, or your parents returned to Vienna after the war, and you could have stayed in America, or she could have stayed in America?
Okay, my mother family, she was 2 years old when the Nazis invaded Austria. And her father and mother, they were looking for a place to run to escape, and they went to, which is it's a town which is then called Ungvar, or Ushgorod today, which was Czechoslovakia at the time, which was neutral. It quickly became Hungary, and Hungary was an ally of Nazi Germany. Today it's in the Ukraine. It has changed nationality so many times, it's incredible. So they were basically illegal or half-legal refugees in Hungary, and only survived the war because a Christian family in Budapest, a baker's family, took them into their apartment and hid them from summer of 1944 until liberation. My father, who was from Budapest, was able to survive with hiding, with fake documents. Like quite a large number of Jews in Budapest were actually able to survive the Shoah. Budapest was the largest, the one city in Central Europe where actually a larger number of Jews survived. While anyone living in the countryside, in Hungarian country, everyone was deported to Auschwitz and killed. Virtually no one survived outside Budapest. Budapest was lucky enough to have at least, I mean, all the cruelties and so. My mother's family didn't have a place to go afterwards, so they went back to their hometown, which was, and then a few years later, when life became too lonely there, as the only Jews and the people who you didn't really, neighbors who you didn't feel that comfortable with, decided to move to Vienna. And my father immigrated after World War II. He fled Hungary after the war from the communists. He went to Austria, was looking for the first place that would take him in outside Europe, and this was Australia. So he became an Australian, lived there for 7 years, but then decided to return because his mother was living in Vienna. She had married again. His father had been killed in Buchenwald. She married again in Vienna, and so he wanted to see her, and then he stayed. When I went to the States, why did I not stay in the States? Well, I actually thought I would stay. I did a degree in international relations, and both in Princeton, both a BA and then a master's. My passion was always journalism. So I said, I want to become a journalist. So I started to work for Dow Jones, the company that you know, in New York. But within 2 weeks, they needed someone in Frankfurt who spoke German. So they sent me off to Frankfurt. I was like, it was a tough time because I really knew so little, both about wire service journalism and about economics. I was there for 4 years. And then basically the question was, where would I go next? By the time I had met Katinka, who is now my wife, we had the question, where should we live a life together? And in Vienna, at this time, a new newspaper was founded by, who actually is a Jewish publisher, Oskar Bronner, which was very much a reaction to the continuous anti-Semitism in Austria. You know, the Waldheim affair, which we will maybe talk in a moment too, has shown how Austria was still not open, not liberal, not open to the world. This city needs a newspaper like the New York Times. So he founded it, and eventually I decided to join, which was in 1991. And my wife and I at the time said, you know, we would stay now for 5 years in Vienna, and then we have to get out again. Well, this was 29 years ago. We had 1 year when we spent in the United States, in New Orleans, where I was teaching a sabbatical, and he taught at the university there, which was a wonderful year, really exciting. But then I felt actually I'm happy to be back in Vienna because, as I said in the beginning, Vienna is an excellent place to live, extremely high quality of life. My job is extremely satisfying, and to be a Jew here in the year 2020, despite all the terrible history, is still a very good thing to be.
Interesting. Yes, so we do have 2 more questions from Thomas Groff in Budapest, and he's asking whether you've ever tried to reach out to the Jewish employees of the United Nations in Vienna. Does Or Chadasch?
Well, actually, we've had a few of them come to us. So we've, and some of them have, some of them are still became active. And this is one of the sources of people. However, a lot of them don't stay for that long. They come and then they leave again, particularly if they're working, if they're more on the diplomatic side. But I think this is a good point. Maybe we can make a stronger effort to reach out and to make ourselves be noticeable and make people aware that we exist. We also have something new in Vienna. You know, the Central European University, CEU, which was founded by George Soros, had to flee from Budapest because Viktor Orban hates everything that's associated with Soros. So they moved to Vienna, and there is actually quite a significant number also of among the faculty members who are Jewish, and this is one of the projects that we have to make ourselves, at least they should know that, hey, we exist, and if you're looking for a place, come to us.
Yeah, no, and I think the president, who was the ex-liberal leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, is
Michael Ignatieff, who is a wonderful person. Yes.
Yeah. So, and from Matthew Falk, we have, what is your view of the people of Jewish descent who fled Austria being granted citizenship? Actually, he said he's currently applying, and I think that is interesting. I know people who've left or forced to leave in 38, and their children, can they become Austrians?
Now, after World War II, I mean, there are almost 200,000 Jews left Austria, and they emigrated to all over the world, a lot of them to the United States or Britain or Palestine. 68,000 Jews, of Austrian Jews, were killed in the Shoah. And the first few decades, Austria made every effort that they would not return. They just made it, they didn't tell them, no, you cannot come, but they didn't make them feel welcome. They're returning the expropriated property was a really difficult process, which often didn't have any results. So for the longest time, it was basically the signal was, okay, we're happy you left, we don't want you. In the last 20 years, or maybe even 30 years, gradually, this has changed more and more. Austrian political leaders, cultural leaders, opinion makers became so fully aware of what they lost through the Nazi persecution and the mass emigration and the killing, that the question was, how can we revive Jewish life? And there were all these various steps, often taken by actually the Conservative Party, which is now again in power, which is now again the chancellor. But the first one, when they formed a coalition in the early 2000s with the far-right party, the Freedom Party, which had a history of anti-Semitism, one thing they did was they really started the restitution program, which really has led to a lot of results. And the latest step was to say, you cannot only apply for Austrian citizenship if you are actually a refugee, but also your children and your grandchildren. And we're going to make it very easy for you. I find this a wonderful thing because it makes people who left Austria or the descendants who had this constant feeling of Austria is the place they never want to step back to. They don't want to enter again. When they came to visit, they were often surprised how welcoming Austria was, how much it has changed. And allowing them to give them citizenship again is something which will tie them even more to Austria. So I think this is a win. It's, as you call it, a win-win situation, a win for them, but also a win for Austria. I think there are quite a number of people in Great Britain, because of Brexit, are now wanting to take advantage of it. There are those in Israel who are, a lot of them want this additional insurance of having a European Union passport. And anyone who does that, let's face it, I mean, these are people that Austria would like to have. I mean, the loss of Jewish population, Jewish life was such an enormous drain on the country. So even they don't have to come back, they don't have to live here. Just if they come to visit and feel attached, it is already a lot is gained.
Yeah. So Matthew says he is a UK citizen and a grandchild. So
yes.
He should apply, I guess, is what you're saying to him.
He should apply, and I think what I know is the law. What it did is it made it easy. And there was one to do that. And there was even what was really important. There was a period after when World War I ended in 1918. There were tens of thousands of Polish Jews fled to Vienna because they were also afraid of Tsarist persecution, but they were also and then later on of communism which became part of the Soviet Union. So, but a lot of and also of anti-Semitism in Poland. But the government of Austria at the time in the 1920s refused to give them Austrian citizenship, most of them. So when they had to escape again in 1938, they were basically stateless. And the big question was what would happen to them. And this was one of the important elements of this law, which says even if you were stateless at the time, if you should have been given the citizenship in the 1920s, but were only denied by the anti-Semitic interior minister of the time, you are entitled now.
All right. Well, I mean, as I told you, my first experience in Austria was covering the election of Kurt Waldheim in the 1980s. And I was wondering, it sounds like actually, at that time I was shocked because it was amazing to me that you could elect a president who was so associated with the Nazis, maybe even war crimes. No, that's, but that seems to have provoked a positive reaction, even though he got elected. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the way Austria is dealing with its past and its own, also the Jewish, the Holocaust, and also its Jewish community, you have to say it's pre-Waldheim or post-Waldheim. He was elected. He was elected also on, and this is what made it. The problem with this Waldheim affair, as it's called, was not so much of any of the crimes that Waldheim committed. He probably was just a small-scale participant and didn't really commit any personal crimes. He lied about it. He never confronted it. And then when he was confronted by journalists with the investigations, with the revelations, he basically blamed the World Jewish Congress for libeling him, and his party, the Conservative People's Party, supported a campaign which was really had these anti-Semitic undertones. It was also had these undertones that you can hear these days also in other countries. We will vote whom we want. We don't want any foreign interference, and particularly not from the Jews. I think Viktor Orban in Hungary, he took some lessons from from the Waldheim campaign, and you know this usually works. If you play the patriotic card, you can get votes otherwise even of people who would not want to vote for you. Once he was elected, and he was shunned by basically most governments in the world. They didn't invite him. They basically ignored him. There was suddenly a kind of a larger movement, particularly coming from young people who says, hey, this cannot stand that way. We have to do something. And it wasn't only in the media. It wasn't only in academia. It was even in small towns where history teachers in schools, where students started to say, let's find out about our Jewish past. And they were a lot of these initiatives which started, and in the course of the 1990s, then the Chancellor Franz Vranitzky, who was a social democrat, for the first time in a speech, he actually admitted the guilt of Austrians in the Nazi crime, something which had always been basically denied previously with the argument, the so-called victims myth, that Austria actually was the first victim of Nazi aggression, and so if you're a victim, you cannot be a perpetrator. And this has taken on a momentum, and I think it's still going on. I think there's an enormous amount of goodwill in this country, which is not isolated among decision makers in politics, but also goes quite far into society, saying we want to, we know there were terrible crimes committed here, partly by our own grandparents, or at least they looked away and didn't do anything about it, and there's something we want to do about it.
That's interesting. At the same time, though, Austria is home to a very virulent far-right party, the Freedom Party, which isn't what I would consider friendly to Jews or to foreigners in general. How do you explain sort of the affection for Jews and Judaism and the, let's say, intolerance of a major party?
Well, in the past, I would have said, it doesn't apply to everyone. And the voters of this party and the party, the Freedom Party, was actually founded by old Nazis. And it did have this German nationalist ideology, was also always had tendencies to be anti-Semitic, and some of its really functionaries, officials, were really truly anti-Semitic, which sometimes came out when they had a little bit too much to drink. So you could say there was a split. The interesting thing is that this party, in the course of the last decade or so, has actually become, you could almost say, philo-Semitic. And this had to do with their growing direction of being anti-Islamic. So because of they didn't like immigration, they didn't like Islam, and at some point it started already with Jörg Haider, who was the rabble-rousing leader of the party in the 1980s and 1990s. Until the 2000s, until he finally split from the party, and then he got killed in a car accident that he caused. He even, although he came from a family of real Nazis, he was looking for Jews. He was looking for Jewish contacts. He wanted to get the kind of the blessing of Jews to say, look, they proved that I'm not anti-Semitic. And the later leader, Heinz Christian Strache, who is now also had to finally leave in disgrace, he was making a conscious effort to reach out to Israel, but there to the far right elements in Israel, where he felt, hey, they feel the same way about Muslims and Islam as we do. But also, once they became part of the Austrian government again, this was in 2017, personally, he made a conscious effort to say we have to stop being anti-Semitic, we have to change our approach to Judaism, to the Jews, using this idea of Judeo-Christian culture and so. This is something which a lot of my Jewish friends and also I had suspicion about. I mean, you don't want to buy it from him, and he tends to be both. But
right, how can you be philo-Semitic but anti-Muslim? I mean, I understand you can be, but is that something that
I think this is fairly?
Jews
I think this is not so difficult. If you start to believe. This is like let's look at Donald Trump. I mean, and many others, and basically look also as it's. So if you basically make the argument that Jews are part of the European Judeo-Christian culture, and the aggressors are now the Muslims, who also then you focus on Muslim anti-Semitism. And you also focus on the threats Israel is facing from Iran and Muslim countries. It becomes very easy to say, no, the foes of our foes are our friends, so the Jews are our friends. For a lot of Jews in Vienna who happen to be actually relatively open to immigration, who want to have a tolerant, open-minded view, this is painful because they don't want to be befriended by people who take a disbigoted position. But it has, even under the previous government where they were part of, which didn't last that long, the government, which was this conservative, the center-right or even rightist government, they took additional steps to be supportive of Jewish life, including the citizenship law that we talked about before.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. But at the same time, Austria has a reputation for being not very friendly to outsiders or refugees. It's been one of the countries that has been most anti-refugee. It's also one of the countries that has been unwilling to fund or help out in the COVID pandemic on funding. How do you explain this? I mean, is it really safe for Jews to be in a country which seems so hostile to foreigners and so not terribly generous?
Well, it can make you sometimes question what you should think about the support that you receive, and you wonder how far will this go, or could it change? Austria has actually taken in quite a large number of immigrants and refugees over decades. In the 1990s, you had a large influx of people coming from East Central Europe and then from the Balkans, from Bosnia and from Kosovo, and then with the refugee wave in 2015. Austria was one of the places they were passing through on the way to Germany, and a large number also stayed. So looking at the per capita rate, the numbers of refugees and asylum seekers that came to Austria and were accepted here is high, higher than many other European countries. At the same time, the backlash was also strong. And this backlash also has certainly the traditions, roots which may also be rooted in the old anti-Semitism, but mostly it is a worry about losing that too many foreigners and refugees would come. Also, Austria is very open to workers' labor migration from the east, from Poland, from Hungary, and from Romania these days. The support for this Freedom Party, which had gone up and down, zigzagged, but at the peak they always got almost 30% of the votes, which is huge for a right-wing populist party. Every time they did this and they joined government, there was a scandal and they imploded again. So there's always there seems to be some kind of automatism where they fall back and then they lose support and then they gradually came back. The problem right now is that the Conservative People's Party of Chancellor Kurz has adopted some of their platforms and has also realized that to win elections in Austria, it's better to be tough on immigration, tough on Muslims, and also tough on Southern Europeans that want our money. And this goes back, explains this why Austria joined the frugal four when it came to establishing this program for Italy and Spain and other countries that are hard hit by the Corona crisis. Austria, which is really so much in the center of Europe, the general feeling is we want to be part of the European Union. I mean, there is the people who want to leave are extremely few, but there's kind of a weaker Euroscepticism, which says Europe is fine as long as it serves our interest, but we don't want too much of it.
Thanks, Eric. We have two last comments, I think, that are interesting. Thomas from Budapest says he hears a lot of echoes about Austrian politics in Hungarian politics and Viktor Orban and the way in which he's philo-Semitic or pro-Israel and anti-Muslim and so forth. And then I think the part of the interview that seems to have provoked the most interest is the citizenship law, which some listeners didn't know too much about. And Bonnie Cohen asks that her father and her family left, I guess, Hungary long before the war, but we have documentation, except my birth certificate says my father was born in Hungary. Is that enough to begin the process? I think more generally, maybe we can conclude, how should all these listeners or people who will hear this interview get in touch to be able to begin the process of getting Austrian citizenship and growing your community, hopefully, or Chadasch too?
Well, just I think if you were born in Hungary, and this was after 1918, when the Habsburg monarchy collapsed, it will not give you much of a claim to Austrian citizenship. I mean, these have been now two separate countries for a very long time. But I believe Hungary also gives you some of these options. Maybe not in the same now in the same organized way, but it's I think there are also options then to receive Hungarian citizenship. Well, if you have any in your family any links to Austria, just contact the next Austrian embassy, the Austrian consulate, and I think it's a very clear process these days. And as far as I know, they are not looking for obstacles, but are rather encouraging it. This is at least the order they receive from the ministry in Austria, saying we want to make it easy. And the government actually would like to, at the end of this process, would like to say, look, so and so many thousands of people actually applied and have received our citizenship. Look how great we are. No one can accuse us anymore of anti-Semitism. So you have to accept that, you have to see that it's also a little bit of a PR campaign, but one that can be really useful and really does serves the purpose of historical justice.
And perhaps rebuilding and rebirthing a strong, vibrant Jewish community in Vienna. So thank you very much.
It may also lead to that, and some of those who get Austrian citizenship may decide then to actually move to Vienna, maybe in retirement, which I can absolutely encourage. And if any of them do that, I can also encourage them knock on the door at Or Chadasch and join our community, because it's the one place which is really also welcoming to anyone coming anywhere in the world. It's important, we also have English speaking, so all the services are in 3 languages, in Hebrew, in German, and in English. Yes, it's a process which we all would like to see.
Well, I hope, Eric, that I'll be able to come to Vienna again soon, post-COVID, and we'll be able to meet in person, and I'll be able to attend Or Chadasch. I think we've spent a great hour. I want to thank you very much for taking the time on a Sunday afternoon to join us, and thank all the audience. And we'll continue with these EUPJ webinars to basically try to connect our communities across Europe. And I hope to be working with you in coming years to grow Or Chadasch and grow progressive Judaism here in Europe. Thanks again, Eric, and have a good evening in Vienna.
Thank you, Bill. It was a pleasure for me.
For me too. Thank you very much. Thank you.